Students, welcome to the geometry students. Welcome to the homework help video, page 85, numbers 1 through 20. Let's go ahead and get started right away, please, and hopefully you'll do well on this assignment. So please turn your books to page 85. I'm turned there myself, and we're looking at question number 1. Question number 1. The if part. Please turn to page 85, and you'll see the questions there. The if part of an if-then statement contains the blank. Well, the answer to that is the hypothesis. The hypothesis. The if part is always the hypothesis. Number 2, the then part of an if-then statement or a conditional statement contains the conclusion. Conclusion. The if part is the hypothesis. The then part is the conclusion. All right, moving on to number 3. Adjacent angles share a common side. Now, for numbers 3 and 4, you need to rewrite the statement as in if-then form, or as a conditional. So what the book says is, you can read along, number 3 says adjacent angles share a common side. Now think about that. Adjacent angles share a common side. So I wrote, if you have two adjacent angles, they share a common side. And so if you'll take a look here, there it is. I said if two angles are adjacent, then they share a common side. I mean, you might have said if adjacent angles, then they share a common side. That's okay, but try to make it more smooth, more common language, like, hey, if two angles are adjacent, then they share a common side. Number 4, you will be late to school if you miss the bus. Now, please don't say if you're late to school, then you miss the bus. That's not true. You could be late to school because you woke up late, because the water line was frozen, you couldn't get a shower, whatever the situation is. But it does say you will be late to school if you miss the bus. So the correct way to write this in a conditional statement is, if you miss the bus, then you will be late to school. That's exactly what that comment or that sentence is saying. All right? Okay, now take a look at number 5. What can you conclude from the following statements? Number 5, what can you conclude from the following true statements? Well, let's take a look and see. All right, here's what number 5 says. Now follow along. Students, please listen to me. If the endpoints of a segment have these coordinates right here, -1, -2, and 5, 2, then the midpoint of the segment is 2, 0. Then it tells you something. Remember I told you when the if part, my computer's freezing up here, guys, so hold on a second. Let me see if I can fix this. Okay, what I told you yesterday is if the if part occurs, then the then part will occur. Or if the hypotenuse occurs, then the conclusion occurs. So look what it says. If the endpoints of a segment have these coordinates, and then we say the endpoints of AB have these coordinates right here, then what can I say? Well, then obviously I can say the midpoint of segment AB is 2, 0. Because if your hypothesis is satisfied, or in other words, if the hypothesis occurs, then the conclusion will also occur. Now, hopefully you remember from yesterday's notes, this is not called the law of syllogism. This is the law of detachment. The law of detachment. Number 6, it's in your book. If the perimeter of a square is 20 feet, then the length of a side of the square is 5 feet. Do you see the conclusion right here? The length of the square is 5 feet. And then look what it says here. If the length of the side of a square is 5 feet, then the area is 25 square feet. So you have your if part, then you have your then part, and then notice how your then part is repeated right down here in the if part. Okay? Now this is called the law of syllogism. What we learned yesterday is if the perimeter is 20 feet, then the length of a side is 5 feet. If the length of the side is 5 feet, then the area is 25 square feet. What we taught you can do is you can take the if part from the first conditional and the then part from the second conditional, and you can put those together like this right here. And that's what you should write. If the perimeter of a square is 20 feet, right there, then the area is 25 square feet. And I got that from right there. And that's called the law of syllogism. Okay? Okay, moving on to number 7. If you'll look in your book, for numbers 7 and 8, the directions say identify the hypothesis and the conclusion. Okay, so number 7 says in your book, if the car is running, then the key is in the ignition. So there's the hypothesis. It's the if part. If the car is running, here's the conclusion, then the key is in the ignition. That's pretty easy. The if part is always the hypothesis. The then part is always your conclusion. All right, number 8 says, if the measure of an angle is 60 degrees, then the angle is acute. So the hypothesis is, if the measure of an angle is 60 degrees, the conclusion is, then the angle is acute. Pretty cut and dried for numbers 7 and 8. Okay, moving on to number 9. Rewrite the statement in if-then form, or in other words, as a conditional. Then underline the hypothesis and circle the conclusion. Underline the hypothesis, circle the conclusion. All right, well, number 9 says this. I'm reading from your book. A number divisible by 6 is also divisible by 2 and 3. So, if a number is divisible by 6, then it is also divisible by 3 and 2. So, there it is. If a number is divisible by 6, then it is also divisible by 2 and 3. Underline the hypothesis, circle the conclusion. There we go. Number 10. Eagles are fish-eating birds. All right, so if you have an eagle, then you're going to have a fish-eating bird. So I said, if an animal is an eagle. Now, if you didn't have yours worded just like that, if you said, if an eagle, then a fish-eating bird, that's okay. But I'm trying to teach you to do things really well in a smooth manner. So I knew I was dealing with an eagle, and the eagle's an animal, so I just said, if an animal is an eagle, then it is a fish-eating bird. This is your hypothesis, and this is your conclusion. All right, number 11. A shape has 4 sides if it is a square. Now listen, if you think you should put for number 11, if a shape has 4 sides, then it is a square. That's not right. I can think of many 4-sided shapes that are not a square. But if you'll look at the comment carefully, it says a shape has 4 sides if it is a square. So this one should be written, if a shape is a square, then it has 4 sides. If a shape is a square, then it has 4 sides. This is your hypothesis, and this is your conclusion. All right, number 12. 2 angles are supplementary if they form a linear pair. Now, if you thought it should go, if 2 angles are supplementary, then they're a linear pair, no way. I could draw a 90-degree angle right here and a 90-degree angle right here, and those 2 angles are supplementary because they add up to 180. However, they're not a linear pair. So be careful. Okay, notice it says if they form a linear pair. So here's what I said. I said if 2 angles form a linear pair, then they're supplementary. And that's true. If 2 angles form a linear pair, like this, there's a straight line, there's a ray coming off of it, or a line. These 2 angles here, angle 1 and angle 2, they form a linear pair. And then, because they form a linear pair, they are supplementary. Underline the hypothesis, circle the conclusion. All right? Moving on to number 13. Now, the directions, let me turn over a page here. The directions for numbers 13, 14, and 15 read as follows. For numbers 13, 14, and 15, they want to know what you conclude from the given true statements. What conclusion can you come to? Well, let's see. Here's 13 right in front of you. If 2 planes intersect, then their intersection is a line. Then after you read this line, then you read 2 planes are intersecting. Go back here. If 2 planes are intersecting, then what? Their intersection is a line, and then we're told 2 planes are intersecting. So what can you conclude? You can conclude that these 2 planes intersect at a line, because it says here, if 2 planes intersect, then their intersection is a line. So 2 planes are intersecting, so what you could write would be their intersection is a plane. because it says here, if two planes intersect, their intersection is a line. Two planes are intersecting, so what can you assume, or what can you conduce? Their intersection, or what can you conclude? Their intersection is a plane. All right, number 14. If x has a value of 4, then 2x has a value of 8. And then look what I know. The value of x is 4. So if I know the value of x is 4, then what can I conclude? You can conclude that 2x has a value of 8. 2x has a value of 8. All right, let's continue on to number 15. If Central High School wins the championship, then the school will celebrate. Central High did win the championship. So what can we conclude? The school will celebrate. Central High will celebrate, or the school will celebrate. Okay? That's numbers 13, 14, and 15. Now, number 16 is a good, nice, solid, higher level thinking problem. So I hope, sorry about that, I hope that you'll pay attention and give this a shot. You might not get it, but you can try, okay? All right, here's what the directions say. Which argument is correct? Either argument 1 or argument 2. Here's argument 1. If two angles measure 40 and 50, then the angles are complementary. Okay? So if two angles measure 40 and 50, then the angles are complementary. Then they tell you angle 1 is 40 and angle 2 is 50. Now look what it just said. If two angles measure 40 and 50, well, angles 1 and 2 measure 40 and 50, then the angles are complementary. So I can state, so angles 1 and 2 are complementary. Now that's argument number 1. That sounds pretty solid to me, guys. That sounds good and solid. I have no problem with that. All right, let's take a look at argument number 2. All right, argument number 2. If two angles measure 40 and 50 degrees, then the angles are complementary, okay? Then look what they state. They don't state two angles measuring 40 and 50. They state angles 1 and 2 are complementary. Now, guys, look at this. Please listen to me and look at this conditional very carefully. This conditional does not say if two angles are complementary, then they measure 40 and 50, because that's not true. I could have an angle that measures 1 degree, and I could have an angle that measures 89 degrees, and they're complementary because they add up to 90, right? So you cannot say if two angles are complementary, then they measure 40 and 50. And that's what they're trying to assume here. Look what they say. Let's take a look at it. Notice what it says here is, if two angles measure 40 and 50, then the angles are complementary. Fine. But then it says angles 1 and 2 are complementary. So because angles 1 and 2 are complementary, then we know for sure that angle 1 is 40, angle 2 is 50. That is not right. That is not right. You might know that angles 1 and 2 are complementary, but you do not know the angles measure 40 and 50. They could measure 60 degrees and 30 degrees, or they could measure 45 degrees and 45 degrees. Just because two angles are complementary doesn't mean they measure 40 and 50. So this is the argument here that is incorrect, and this is the one here that is correct. If two angles measure 40 and 50, then the angles are complementary. Then we're told that angles 1 and 2 equal 40 and 50 respectively. So angles 1 and 2 are complementary. And that is the correct argument. That's a tough problem. Number 17, 18, and 19. Write these statements. I'm sorry, I'm reading the directions incorrectly. Write the conditional statement or the if-then statement that follows from the pair of true statements. Now, this is called the law of syllogism, and this is what we're going to use. Watch carefully. If the sun is shining, then it's a beautiful day. If it's a beautiful day, then we'll have a picnic. So you take the if part from here and the then part from here, and we can state, if the sun is shining, then we will have a picnic. And that's what you would write. There it is. All right, number 18. If the stereo is on, then the volume is loud. If the volume is loud, then the neighbors will complain. So I can state, if the stereo is on, then the neighbors will complain. There we go. Moving on to number 19. This one's tough. Oh, this is tough. If Todd goes to the movies, then this is supposed to be Gabriela, I believe. I'm going to fix that right now. Thank you for your patience. If Todd goes to the movies, then Gabriela will go to the movies. And then you would expect it to say here, if Gabriela goes to the movies, then, but that's not what it says. So be careful here. Think this through. If Todd goes to the movies, then Gabriela will go to the movies. But look at line 2. If Chris goes to the movies, then Todd will go to the movies. Well, guys, we can read these in a different order. We don't have to start with the top. We can say this. If Chris goes to the movies, then Todd will go to the movies. That's a fact. And if Todd goes to the movies, then Gabriela will go to the movies. So we can simply say, if Chris goes, then Todd goes. If Todd goes, then Gabriela goes. So I can say, if Chris goes, then Gabriela will go. If Chris goes to the movies, then Gabriela will go to the movies. Hope that makes sense. Look, if Chris goes, then we know Todd's going. And if Todd goes, we know Gabriela's going. So if Chris goes, then Gabriela's going. All right, and then last but not least, number 20. And number 20 says, rewrite the slogan. Above there's a sign. Write it as a conditional or an if-then statement. Then underline the hypothesis and circle the conclusion. And it's pretty simple, guys. Let me find it here. There it is. Look at the sign there in the middle of your page 86, Bargain Bob's Used Cars. If you want a selection of used car, if you want a great selection of cars, then you'll go to Bargain Bob's Used Cars. If you want a great selection of cars, then you'll go to Bargain Bob's Used Cars. And that's basically it. I guess we should do what the directions say. We should underline the hypothesis. That's really good underline. Let's try that again. And let's circle the conclusion. And there we go. Guys, I hope this homework help video has been a help. Please continue to work hard.